I'm Peggy Peck, MedPage Today, reporting from the American Heart Association meeting in New Orleans. Drug-eluting stents versus bare metal stents. This time, data from a large registry trial give the edge to drug-eluting stents, and there was even a mortality benefit, as we hear from Dr. Maury.
The safety of drug-eluting stents versus bare metal stents has been a matter of some concern. A year ago, we presented the overall findings from this registry looking at overall outcomes for patients with drug-eluting versus bare metal stents at 2 years. And this year we're presenting 3-year follow-up on patients in the important subgroup of diabetes. And diabetes has been an important area to look at the safety of drug-eluting stents because there have been conflicting data regarding the safety in this important subset of patients. It's also a patient population that's rapidly growing across the world and certainly in the United States and represents now approximately 1/3 of all angioplasty performed. We began with 21,000 PCI patients treated over this time period with complete 3-year follow-up. The subset of diabetic patients represented about 6,000 patients, and after excluding non-residents and non-linkable files, we had about 5,000 diabetic patients, 66% treated with drug-eluting stents only and 34% treated with bare metal stents only. Looking at the frequency of diabetes overall, as well as according to different types of diabetes, we found that the diabetes prevalence was 28.5% in the overall population, and was similar according to drug-eluting stent or bare metal stent treated patients. Within the diabetic patient population, about 1/3 of patients were insulin requiring. So the primary findings of this analysis were the matched risk differences at 3 years, and we compared mortality, myocardial infarction, and target vessel revascularization. You can see that all of the estimates here favor drug-eluting stents. We certainly see that for target vessel revascularization, there is efficacy of drug-eluting stents as compared to bare metal stents, with an absolute 5.4% reduction in the need for repeat procedures in the target vessel. And that was highly significant. Now, looking at the important safety endpoints of death and recurrent myocardial infarction, we also found reductions. Now, it's important to note that we designed this analysis primarily to look at the safety of drug-eluting stents relative to bare metal stents. And this was an interesting finding that there was actually a small reduction in mortality and myocardial infarction that met statistical significance.
And from the discussant, Dr. David Williams, we heard this.
Perhaps surprisingly, not only was there not any hazard with drug-eluting stents compared to bare metal stents, there was actually a statistically significant benefit in reduced incidence of death and MI in the drug-eluting stent patients. So are these findings likely to be correct? And how do they compare with other investigations in this particular area? One investigation that our dynamic registry group has been involved in was just published in September, looking at a similar research question, bare metal versus drug-eluting stents in patients with diabetes. And we also analyzed these in terms of whether or not these were insulin-requiring diabetic patients or not. And what we observed was, consistent with the results Dr. Lori presented, was a reduction in repeat revascularization for all groups receiving drug-eluting stents compared to bare metal stents. So I think that conclusion is likely correct and intuitively fits in with our understanding of how these stents work. We did not observe, however, a reduction in death or MI among insulin-requiring diabetics, but did observe that among patients who did not require insulin. So this is of interest and somewhat provocative.
So to sum up, in this registry trial, there was a benefit for drug-eluting stents in a diabetic population. I'm Peggy Peck, MedPage Today.